Welcome to Unit 2, Real Estate License Law and Qualifications for the Licensure. Every state requires that individuals who practice real estate for compensation for others must be licensed. Now, the Florida Statute 475 is by far one of the most comprehensive laws in the nation. It sets forth operating standards for the licensees and penalties for non-compliances or violations. This unit is going to give you a brief history about the real estate licensees law. Now, candidates who are applying for the real estate sales license or the broker's license have to meet certain minimum requirements, and all those steps are going to be explained in detail in this unit. The main learning objectives for you in this chapter, in this unit, are that when you have completed this unit, you'll be able to accomplish a set of things. You'll be able to distinguish between the federal and the state laws and administrative rules important to real estate. You'll be able to distinguish among the three license categories. You'll be able to describe detailed license requirements, license application requirements. You'll be able to distinguish and describe non-resident application requirements. And also, you'll be able to differentiate between the mutual recognition agreements. You'll be able to identify the qualifications of the sales associate license. You'll be able to describe the education requirements for pre-licensing, post-licensing, and continuing education. You'll also be able to identify the qualifications for a broker's license. You'll be able to distinguish between the registration and the licensure, the difference between these two terms. You'll be able to identify that what type of real estate services require a real estate license and who are exempted from that license. We'll also go over some key terms that will help you memorize the text for your exam, terms that you might not have heard in the previous chapters. We're talking about expungement. We're talking about license by endorsement, mutual recognition, prima facie evidence, withhold adjunction, registration. So these are some of the terms that you will come across, and I will be going over each and every term in detail with you. So let's go ahead and start with our Unit 2 regarding the real estate license law and qualifications for the licensure. Now, statutes and rules which are important to real estate. Now, the Florida statute has different chapters. The Florida statute chapters 20 So let's talk about the Florida Statute 20. It establishes the structure of the executive branch for the Florida's government. The Florida Statute 475 establishes legal rights and responsibilities of all real estate licenses. The Part 1, which is the FREC, Florida Real Estate Commission, establishes for the real estate brokerage. The Part 2 is FREB, which is for the Florida Real Estate Appraisal Board. Chapter 3, Part 3 is for the Commercial Real Estate Sales Commission Act, Commission Lien Act. And Part 4 is for the Commercial Real Estate Leasing Commission Lien Act. So Part 3 is for the sales, Part 4 is for the leasing part. Now, Florida Statute Chapters 455, that is for the Department of Business and Professional Regulations. 455.10 provides that an individual cannot be disqualified from practicing the real estate profession, even if you are not a U.S. citizen. It concerns the unlicensed practice of the profession. It concerns licensees' examinations and professional testing services, The chapter 455.27227 authorizes the Florida Real Estate Commission to discipline a licensee who failed to notify the commission within 30 days of any conviction or pleading guilty to a crime regardless of jurisdiction. Now, the Florida statute, chapter 120, is for the Administrative Procedure Act. It defines the process by which the agencies decide and implement agency actions. The licensing and disciplinary process for the licensees is outlined in the chapter 120. And chapter 61J2 establishes the FREC rules. So let's move on to the three categories of the real estate license. So the first basic category is, the first initial category is the sales associate license. That's the course that you are attending right now for the pre-licensing for a Florida real estate sales associate. Now you have to remember that as a sales associate, that's where your career begins as a real estate agent in the state of Florida. At the time when you get your license, the license is going to be in an inactive status. Okay, we'll go over that a little bit more in details as we move forward in this course. But to remember, the initial license that issued to you is in an inactive sales associate license. Sales associate and broker associates are employed by and work under the direction and a supervision of an employing broker. We'll discuss that a little bit in detail as well. But for now, you have to remember that a sales associate cannot practice real estate individually by himself or herself. You have to work under a supervision and a direction of a employing broker. So a salesperson, the definition of a sales associate, we used to call that salesperson. Now it's defined as a sales associate. It's one and the same thing. The definition of a sales associate is any person, any individual who performs real estate services for compensation under the direction of a broker or an owner developer. Okay, that's the definition of a sales associate. Now the question is, who is an owner developer and why they are different from an employing broker? So an owner developer is a unlicensed entity that sells, exchanges, or leases its own property. Okay? They don't provide real estate services to the general public, but they only sell, exchange, or lease their own properties. Now, this is something important to remember. You might see a question on this topic in one of your exams, that a owner's developer staff must hold an active real estate license in order to be paid a commission or any other compensation based on a transactional basis, which is not a salary, which is not an hourly or a weekly. But if a sales associate is getting paid on a transactional basis, a commission, or even a flat fee, but if it's on a transactional basis, all the employees, all the sales associate of that owner developer must have an active real estate license. Now, the owner developer itself, the entity, does not have to be licensed. Now, in this category, if your sales staff, if the sales staff working for the owner developer is paid strictly on a salary basis, then that sales staff is exempted from a real estate license. So now let's talk about the broker. Okay, hopefully down the road, when you have the adequate experience and you decide to venture into opening up your own brokerages and decide not to work under supervision, but to go solo, then that's the license that you will be applying for. Now, the broker is a person, again, similar capacity. They do provide real estate services for another, for compensation. But the difference is the broker status requires additional education, experience, and of course, passing the broker's license exam. We will go over that in detail. What are the requirements? What are the steps involved in getting a broker's license? But for now, you should remember that you need experience, you need additional experience, you need additional education, and you have to pass the broker's pre-licensing and post-licensing in order to get a broker's license. Now, the third category is a broker associate. Many new people in this industry, they get a little bit confused about what is a broker associate. So an individual who has a broker's license, who has fulfilled all the requirements of the pre-licensing, post-licensing, and holds an active real estate broker's license, but decides to work under a supervision of an employing broker, then that individual holds the title of a broker associate. Just to recap, a sales associate begins a career as a sales associate under a broker or an owner-developer. Owner-developer is an unlicensed entity that sells, exchanges, leases its own properties, such as a real estate development company. Sales staff must hold an active real estate license if they are being paid on a transactional basis. Now let's talk about the application requirements. Of course, the applicants have to pay an application fee in addition to the initial biennial license fee. The license examination fee and fingerprint processing fee is directly paid to the vendor. Now, the Department of Business and Professional Regulations offer exemptions to 3 categories of applicants from the initial license fee. Okay, just the initial license fee is exempted. Number 1 being the low-income applicants. Number 2, a military personnel and their spouses. And number 3 is a military veteran and their spouses. Now, in order for you to qualify for the Veteran Fee Waiver Program, the DBPR waives several fees for veterans and their spouses based on certain categories, certain requirements. Now, number 1 being the application fee, the initial biennial fee, and unlicensed activity fee for military veterans and their spouses who apply for a license within 60 months after their honorable discharge. Please remember this. The application fee, the initial biennial license fee, and the unlicensed activity fee for military veterans is exempted as long as they apply for a license within 60 months of their honorable discharge. Now, if the 60-month time period is not met, then the military veterans and their spouses can request the exemption of the initial biennial license fee. Now, that request has to be made in writing, and it depends upon the DBPR. It's up to their discretion whether they approve that request or not. Now, the comprehensive fee waiver applies to pretty much all types of DBPR licenses for veterans and their spouses who apply within the first 60 months of their honorable discharge. So in the next screen, you will see we have a little chart for you that will tell you that what kind of application fees are being exempted for which category. So once you have determined whether you have to pay for the licensing fee or you are exempted in one of those categories, your next step is going to be the fingerprinting. Now, the fingerprinting are, back in the days, we used to go to the police station and registered vendors and go through, physical fingerprinting using the cards. That's no longer there. I mean, the option is available still, but things with technology have become much faster now. So you can go to any of the registered vendors registered with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the information is going to be available for you through different sources. Now, this is something important, and you might see a question on this topic in one of your exams. Your background check questions about your criminal history. Now, you have to disclose in details of all the cases. If you have been convicted of a crime, if you have pled guilty to a crime, you must disclose prior convictions, even if the court action, the injunction, was withheld. You should disclose on the application any other names or aliases if you have used, including a maiden name. Now, your background questions can concern criminal matters, judgments, a denial of a license, if that has ever happened in the past, or any previous disciplinary action against you. Now, remember, you do not have to disclose personal financial information, such as a bankruptcy or a foreclosure or credit information. You have to remember these 4 questions. Have you ever been convicted or found guilty? Has any judgment or decree of a court entered against you? Have you had an application denied for registration, certification, or licensure? Has any license or permit to practice any regulated profession by the DBPR has been disciplined? So these are the 4 questions that you have to remember and answer them to the best of your knowledge. Like I said, mentioned, applicants are not requested, not asked to disclose personal financial information. Applicants who answer yes to any of those 4 questions that we talked about should supply supporting documentations from the clerk or a police department if if you have any documentation for that. Any government agency which has taken legal record of the discipline or the action that was taken against you. Now, once you have supplied FREC with all that information, FREC reviews the application and the supporting documents and makes a determination whether the applicant must be on the commission's agenda to review. After the appearance, now FREC votes to approve or deny the application. So let's talk about the application processing time periods. They have the initial 30 days period for the DBPR to check the application for any errors and omissions, and they will issue you a notice of insufficiency if they require any additional information. And they are required within 90 days to inform the applicant about their decision of either approving your application or denying the application. Now, in the event if the application is denied, you as an applicant have 21 days to request a formal hearing. Once your application status becomes exam eligible, it's your responsibility as an applicant to complete the pre-licensing course and provide the proof of satisfactory completion to the test vendor. Now, remember, the DBPR does not send a proof of satisfactory pre-licensing course completion to the vendor. It's your responsibility. They will only notify that the candidate is exam eligible, but you have to provide satisfactory proof that you have completed the pre-licensing course and successfully passed the end of the course exam. Remember, theft of license exam or any unauthorized copying of an exam is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. Now, let's talk about license by endorsement. This is a special category. Now, license by endorsement is for active duty or former active duty members and their spouses, including their surviving spouses. There are some requirements. The former active duty member must be honorably discharged. At the time of the application, applicant must hold a valid license for a corresponding profession in another state or a foreign jurisdiction. It applies to the spouse or the surviving spouse. It also applies to all DBPR licenses if the member applicant holds a valid license regarding the corresponding profession. A license by endorsement is issued without requiring the pre-license course or a state license exam. Now, the license for endorsement for U.S. service of members and their spouses. On the next screen, you will see some a breakdown of key points. It applies to the U.S. active U.S. Armed Force service members, spouses, and their former service members and spouses. Must hold a valid license of the same type from another state, U.S. territory, or a foreign jurisdiction. They must submit an application and electronic fingerprint. It applies to all professional licenses issued by the Department of Business and Professional Regulations, which is the DBPR. Now, the initial application fees will be waived except for the fingerprinting fee. The good part is there is no pre-licensing course or no state exam is required if you choose and if you qualify to apply for the license by endorsement. Another interesting question and another topic that you might see a question on one of your exams. The definition of a Florida resident. Remember this. Any person who has resided in the state of Florida continuously for a period of 4 calendar months or more in the preceding year qualifies for Florida residency. 4 months, 4 calendar months in the preceding year. Now, you also have to remember, in order for you to apply for a Florida real estate license, a Florida residency is not required. You can be a resident of any other state or a foreign jurisdiction and still apply for a Florida real estate license and practice real estate in the state of Florida. So we talked about the definition of Florida residency. So let's talk about what's the purpose of this mutual recognition agreement. Number one, it's the intent to recognize the education and the experience that a sales associate or real estate licensee has acquired in any other state or a foreign jurisdiction with which the Florida has a written agreement, a contractual agreement. A person who is licensed in a mutual recognition state and who wants to obtain a Florida real estate license through the mutual recognition must complete the process that Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation has established before becoming a resident of Florida. Okay, so remember, the mutual recognition is only available for non-residents only. It applies to non-residents. So if you are a resident of any other state and you want to obtain Florida real estate license, you cannot be a resident of the state of Florida and apply for the mutual recognition. The applicant must submit a Florida real estate license application and a certification of license history in the state where you have been licensed. Applicant must also pass a 40-question Florida-specific real estate license law examination. Okay, remember, might see a question about that. Applicant must pass a 40-question Florida-specific real estate license law examination with a passing rate of 75% or higher. Now, licensees who obtain a Florida real estate license through a mutual recognition, you still have to comply with the post-licensing education requirements. As we move forward in the course, we will discuss about the different education requirements after you obtain your real estate license, post-licensing being one of the most important ones. But just remember this, licensees who obtain a real estate license in the state of Florida through mutual recognition still have to comply with the education requirements, the post-licensing and continuing education requirements as established by the Department of Business and Professional Regulations and the Florida Real Estate Commission. Now, another important topic, you have to understand the difference between a mutual recognition and a reciprocity. A reciprocity is an agreement between two states that allow a real estate license with a valid state, it is valid in one state, to obtain a license in another state without further examinations or education. Okay, so if let's say Florida has a reciprocity agreement with the state of California, and you have an active real estate license in the state of California, you could have just come in and obtain a real estate license without any further education. But that's not the case. Now, Florida has mutual recognition agreements with different states, and the information is available for you. But remember this, Florida does not have a reciprocity with any other state. Remember this, you might see a question like that on one of your exams. Now let's talk about what are the requirements for you to apply for a real estate license, sales associate license. Now, before you apply for a sales associate license, you need to meet a certain set of requirements. You must be 18 years of age and older. You can't be under 18 and apply for a real estate license. You must possess a high school diploma or higher or any equivalent degree. You must possess a valid U.S. Social Security number. Now remember, you do not have to be a U.S. citizen in order for applying for a real estate license. You must be residing in the United States with a valid form of visa. You can be a permanent resident. You can be on a valid visa, which is acceptable. But being a U.S. citizen is not a requirement. It's not a prerequisite for you to apply for the real estate license. You must be honest and of a good character and possess a reputation fair dealing. You must be competent and qualified to make real estate transactions and conduct negotiations on behalf of your investors, clients, and others. Remember, we talked about in the past that when completing the application, an application must disclose if ever convicted, found guilty, or if currently under any criminal investigation. If the applicant has done business under any other name, any other alias, used any maiden names, if ever had any disciplinary action against them, or a license to practice regarding any license that has been issued by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. You have to disclose if you have ever been denied a real estate license, not just in the state of Florida, but in any other state or foreign jurisdiction. Now let's talk about the education requirements. Number one, what you're doing right now, you're taking this class. This is one of the important prerequisites for your real estate pre-licensing is to take the 63 hours pre-licensing course, which is course 1, and pass it with pass the school exam with a passing score of 70 or higher. Now the state exam is going to be 75 or higher. Right now we're talking about the course 1, the FREC course 1. You have to attend 60 hours of instruction, and then 3 hours is for the end of the course exam. You have to pass the score with a 70 or higher on 100 multiple type questions, multiple choice questions. Now let's talk about who is exempted from the pre-licensing course requirement. In this next chart on the screen, you will see that if you have a 4-year or higher real estate degree, you are exempted from the sales associate course. You're also exempted from the broker course. You're exempted from the post-licensing, but you are not exempted from the continuing education or the license exam, which means you get the flexibility of not attending any of those classes which are required by the FREC, but you still have to fulfill the continuing education requirements, and you also have to fulfill the licensing exam. Now, if you are a Florida licensed attorney, if you choose to apply for the sales associate license, you're exempted. But if you decide to move up and get a broker's license, then you're not exempted. You still have to take the required FREC 2 broker pre-licensing course. You're also not exempted from the post-licensing requirement. But if you're a Florida real estate attorney, Florida licensed attorney, then you are exempted from the 14-hour continuing education. So remember this chart, you might see a question on one of those topics. So the license exam. So you've taken the class, you've successfully passed the end of the course exam. Now, it's time for you to go and take the state exam. Now, the state exam is going to be similar. It's going to be in a multiple choice questions and are administered on a computer. You don't have the paper exams anymore. Everything is going to be on a computer. It's offered in English and Spanish. Examinees are required to show at least 2 forms of IDs at the site. Examinees must provide a copy of the grade report from the class to the exam vendor. It's your responsibility to make sure that you provide them a copy of your successful course completion and passing certificate. Now, for the state exam, a grade of 75% or higher is required. The examination is graded by the test vendor, and an exam report is issued pretty much immediately after the exam. It might take a few minutes. It's computerized. The click of the button, they can tell you you've passed. If you have a grade of 75% or higher, for any reason, if you have not able to pass, then they will give you a piece of paper, a report, a grading report, which is going to tell you what your scores are. Now, if you pass, they only give you a pass report. It doesn't tell you how much you scored if you passed. But if you do not pass, then yes, you will get details of the grading and which areas you missed what many questions and the areas that you need to focus before you choose to retake the exam. that there are certain time limits. So the license application expires 2 years after it's approved, after it's received, not approved, after it's received by the DBPR. Applicants who do not pass the state exam within 2 years have to start from scratch and must retake the course, the FREC 1 course, the pre-licensing course that you're taking right now. The completion date is the date that the student passed the pre-license end of the course exam. Remember this. It has nothing to do with the application. Applicants who do not pass the state license exam within the first 2 years of their course completion date must retake the exam. The completion date is the date student passed the pre-licensing end of the courses. Remember this. There might be a question. We already talked about it, that need the form of IDs. Now, the photo bearing exam report. In the exam report, once you pass, you will get a pass notice. It will, your license is going to be in the initial inactive license status. You will have to file the DBPR RE11 form, which we'll talk about later in the course, to request for the change of status from your employer, from your employing broker, or an owner developer, depending upon who you choose to work with. Now, in the event if you do not pass, the notice is going to indicate points scored in each content area. Retest procedures. It will tell you that you have the option of reviewing the exam within 21 days from the grade of notice. If you feel that that result is not satisfactory, then you do have the option of requesting a review for that exam. Post-licensing, a very important subject. In the course of my real estate career, I have seen many agents, many real estate licensees simply forget to take that post-licensing course. It's a very important aspect of your real estate license. The Florida Real Estate Commission requires that you must complete a 45-hour real estate post-licensing course before the expiration of your initial license, okay? Be very mindful about the dates, because if you fail to do that, you have to start from scratch. Your license becomes null and void. We will talk about certain categories, certain situations where you might be able to get an extension, but by default, if you do not complete the 45-hour post-licensing before the expiration of your initial license, you have to start from scratch, which means you have to retake the exam, you have to complete the course 1, and you have to pass the state license exam all over again. Now, Florida licensed attorneys who are also licensed as active real estate sales associates must complete the post-licensing education requirement. Now, real estate sales associates who have received a 4-year degree or any higher degree in the state of real estate from an accredited institution, then they are exempted from the real estate sales associate post-licensing education requirement. Now, like I mentioned, in certain hardship situations, the DBPR may offer you a 6-month extension, depending upon your request, depending upon the supportive documents. If you had a hardship, if you had any extenuating circumstances, it's up to the discretion of the DBPR to give you a 6-month extension to complete your post-licensing education. Now, there is no legislative authority to grant you an extension beyond that 6 months, okay? Remember this. Nope, there is no extension beyond the 6-month period. For the hardship, just recap quickly. Hardship cases may allow up to 6 months to complete the post-licensing education. The extension must be made in writing to the FREC with basis and requests for those documentation. FREC does not have the legislative authority to extend this beyond the 6-month period. And there are some tips regarding the post-license education. Do not enroll until you are licensed. Okay, do not. Enroll as soon as you become a licensed. Because you have to remember, once we get our real estate license, we get busy, get excited about the career and start properties, training. There's so much involved in starting your real estate career that agents tend to forget. Enroll as soon as you're licensed. Do not wait until the last minute. Take the 45 hours and get it out of your way. It's a one-time deal. You only have to take the 45-hour course just once before the expiration of your initial license. From that point onwards, you only have a 14-hour continuing education requirement that you will be taken care of for the rest of your real estate career. Either you are a real estate sales associate, you're a real estate broker, or a broker associate. The broker requirements, like we talked about it, if you have the experience and if you choose to upgrade your license and venture into opening up your own business, own brokerage, own broker shop, or even just, for additional knowledge, you wish to obtain a broker license and still want to work under an employing broker, you have to follow a set of requirements before you choose to apply for the broker's license. One of the requirements is that you do have to complete that 45-hour post-licensing course. So if you choose to apply for a broker's license, your base requirement is that you should have completed that sales associate post-licensing course. The next requirement is that you need to complete the FREC course 2, which is the commission prescribed pre-licensing course for the broker candidate, okay, with a passing score of 70 or higher on the school exam and 75 or higher on the state exam. Now, unlike the sales associate course, which is 63 hours broken down into 60 hours of instructions and 3 hours of examination, testing, the broker's pre-licensing course is broken down into 69 hours of education plus 3 hours of end of the course exam, with a total of 72 hours of pre-licensing education. We already talked about the exemptions, which is in your book, figure 2.3, the summary of education exemptions. Now, before you choose to apply for the broker's license, there are some experience requirements. You need to have 24 months of active real estate licenses in the previous 5 years. You have to have an active real estate license in the past 5 years for a minimum period of 24 months. You must have worked as a sales associate working for a Florida real estate broker or a broker in any other state, as a sales associate working for a government agency, as a broker in any other state or nation. So if you're a broker licensed in the state of Texas, you can apply for a broker license in the state of Florida and still be fine with the experience requirements. Just like a Florida real estate sales associate, the broker's license also have post-licensing education requirements. Now, the Florida brokers must complete a 60 hours. The sales associate must complete 45 hours. but the Florida brokers must complete a 60 hours post-licensing education before the initial renewal of their broker license. Again, just like the sales associate, failure to complete that post-licensing requirements before the expiration date will cause the license to become null and void, and you won't be operate under that license. Now, in such cases where a broker has failed to complete that requirement, they can revert back to a sales associate license, okay? As long as you complete the 14-hour continuing education requirement within 6 months after the expiration of the broker's license. Prima facie evidence. Evidence that's good. The definition of a prima facie evidence is any evidence that's good and sufficient on its face to establish a fact. Okay. So in this case, a real estate license is a prima facie evidence that the licensee holds a current and a valid real estate license. That's enough. That's more than enough proof. Prima facie evidence that you are authorized to practice real estate in the state of Florida. So before we talk about real estate services, let's talk a bit about the registration and the licensure process. What is a registration? The registration is the process of submitting information to the DBPR, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, that is entered into their DBPR records. Now, information is placed on record includes the name, the address of each licensed broker and sales associate, the name and the business address of the sales associates and their employer, their license status, active or inactive, and if that sales associate or a broker is involved in any capacity as an officer or a director or a partner of that real estate entity. Now, remember this, all real estate sales licensees, whether you are a sales associate, whether you're a broker associate licensed in Florida, you must be registered with your employing broker. You cannot practice real estate on your own. You have to work under the guidance, under the supervision of an employing broker. You will be issued a wallet-sized license and a certificate of registration. That license is going to have the effective date and the expiration date on that license. It serves as a prima facie evidence that it's good and sufficient that you are authorized to practice real estate in the state of Florida. Definition of real estate services. Now, during this entire course, we will be talking about a lot of acronyms which you will encounter and which have been specifically created to help you memorize some key topics about the course. So let's talk about real estate services. It's the definition. We talked about that a little bit in chapter 1, in unit 1 of this course. So the real estate services, it includes any activity, any real estate activity involving compensation, performing service for the following activities in terms of sale, exchange, leasing of real estate property, including mineral rights, business enterprises, business opportunities. All of them are collectively part of real estate services. So if you see, it's been broken down into an acronym, a bar sale. If you advertise for real estate services, if you buy or help somebody buy, if you appraise any non-federally related transaction, we'll talk about that as we move further in the course. If you rent or provide rental information, if you sell, auction, lease, or exchange, if you do any of these services, if you provide any of these services for compensation for others, then you are required to have a real estate license. You also talk about compensation. What's compensation? Okay. Anything of value or valuable consideration, directly or indirectly, paid, promised, or even expected to be paid, is considered as compensation. It includes monies in the terms of in form of salaries, bonuses, commissions, and gratuities. It includes things of value, such as dinner, flower, wine, gift certificates, event tickets, and so forth. So there is a very strict requirement about how we can get compensated. In other words, if somebody offers you a candy, a slice of pizza in exchange for real estate services, that is considered as compensation. And in order for you to legally get that compensation, you must have an active real estate license to practice any of those services. Now, apart from being compensated, even a presumption that you are acting as a real estate broker can be made as a disciplinary action against an individual who's trying to perform a real estate services for another. And it happens a lot. It happens with many individuals who pretend that they are real estate licensees, and they and the general public makes a presumption that this person, this individual, is acting as a real estate broker, is also illegal and qualifies for a disciplinary action, regardless of compensation. So individuals who are they may be liable, they will be liable, they may be liable for acting as a real estate broker, even if they are not being compensated, that still will qualify for a disciplinary action. This is an important topic, and you might see a question on this in one of your exams as well. Who is exempted from a real estate license? So in order to provide flexibility to individuals and entities who do not really need to get into a real estate license and go through the education and go through the licensing process and the testing process. So the DBPR and FRAC have created a list of exemptions for entities and peoples and individuals who are exempted from real estate license requirements. So number one is the owner exemption. Okay. So any owner of a property, they may be able to buy, sell, exchange, or lease their own property without having a real estate license. Officers and directors of a corporation or a partnership or any legal entity, they may buy, sell, exchange, or lease the property of that business entity without having a real estate license. Now, partners in a real estate partnership are exempted from licensure if selling property owned by the partnership, provided the partnership receives a share of the profit in proportion to their interest in the partnership. There is a group of investors who own a single family home or multiple properties, and they decide to sell it to the general public. They are exempted from the licensing requirement, and they can legally go ahead and represent themselves. Owners of timeshare periods, who owns timeshares for their own use or occupancy and may later sell their interest. They are also exempted from the real estate licensee's requirements under the owner exemptions. Now, the second exemption that is being offered is exemption based on your career. Here we're talking about attorneys at law when acting under the scope of their professional duties, and they don't need a licensing requirement. But remember this, holding a Florida real estate attorney license does not entitle that attorney to get compensation for performing real estate service. They can do that, but not for compensation. Another example of an exemptions based on a career is certified public accountant, CPAs, when performing accounting duties, of course, within the scope of their professional duties. State certified and real estate appraisers as licensed by the Florida Statute, Chapter 475, Part 2, are also exempted from the licensing requirement based on their career. The third category for salaried employee exemptions. Now, here we are talking about salaried employees for business entities who may buy and sell, exchange, and lease properties for their employers, provided they're not paid on a transactional basis. It goes back to the same concept of working for an owner-developer. A classic example for that would be a leasing manager, a leasing sales associate at an apartment complex, a receptionist, a front desk person who is renting rooms in a hotel, motel, are good examples for that. Like I said, the salaried employees of an apartment community who do not receive compensation on a transactional basis. Salaried managers of condominiums and apartment complexes, salaried employees of an owner-developer, provided they don't read it. So the whole concept is around, as long as they are not they are salaried and not being paid on a transactional basis and on a commission, then yes, they do qualify for an exemption from the licensing requirement based on a salaried employee exemption. The next category is going to be for a court and legally appointed person. Now, in certain cases, the court appoints individuals acting within the limitations of their duties to represent in the sale of or purchase of real estate transactions. Those individuals are also exempted from the licensing requirement. Power of attorneys, a good example. A person given a power of attorney to sign contracts and on somebody else's behalf happens very frequently within families, within businesses, when people are traveling, people are not available. The power of attorney is a good example of licensing exemption. Now, apart from these four main categories, there's also miscellaneous exemptions that are available. So one of the examples is persons who sell cemetery lots. Now, this exemption exists because Florida Statute Chapter 475 excludes the cemetery lots from the definition of a real estate property. Individuals who rent lots in a mobile home park or an RV park, they are also not considered as real property and exempted from the licensing requirements. Dealers who are registered with the Security Exchange Commissions selling business enterprises are exempted from licensing requirements. Hotel and motel clerks who rent lodging accommodations to prospective tenants, prospective clients on behalf of their establishments are exempted from licensing based on the miscellaneous exemptions. Now, tenants of an apartment complex may receive up to a $50 referral fee for referring a new tenant to that community. Now, those individuals are also exempted from the license requirement as required by the state of Florida. So this concludes our Chapter 2, Unit 2 of the Florida Real Estate Principal Practices in Law, the required 63 hours pre-licensing course. So before we move on to the new chapter, let's knock out these questions. We have about 10 questions, multiple choice format, and let's take care of these questions. Let's get them out of the way, and let's move on to Chapter 3, and I will see you soon in Unit 3.